Hi guys, I'm Gasha. Welcome to the channel and welcome as always to our coffee times to discuss movies and horror, and today I bring you my Saw ranking.
It's coffee time!
So we're here today to discuss the 10 Saw movies and rank them. So now that the 10 are out and I have watched all 10 of them, I'm here to give you my thoughts on them and how I would personally rank them. The Saw series started with a short that James Wan and Leigh Whannell did and tried to pitch their idea for this movie to a lot of different studios, and it kept getting rejected until it was picked up. And the first Saw movie came out in 2004. It was a horror thriller that it was not even supposed to come out in the cinema at all, and when it came out nobody thought that it was going to spawn such a huge franchise. 5 different directors have worked on the franchise, and 10 movies later the franchise seems stronger than ever. The franchise focuses on the activities of a terminally ill patient called John Kramer that we get to know as the Jigsaw Killer. The series follows not only Jigsaw but also his victims that he puts on these really well designed traps that he likes to call tests, and where he gives his victims a choice, live or die. We also have many other interesting characters in the franchise, including policemen and other suspects. We also have accomplices in the franchise, and if there's also something you should know about this franchise is that there's always a big twist coming. Jigsaw is at the end of the day seeking for justice. He wants to give individuals a chance to reconsider their lives, people that are being ungrateful, people that have caused a lot of pain and suffering to others. So in a way he is kind of serving justice in his own way. He does give his victims a chance to redeem themselves, a chance to change the course of their lives, and all they have to do is to show that they have the will to survive. I personally always had a soft spot for Jigsaw. I never thought that he was 100% evil, also not 100% good, but there was kind of like a gray area there, and I always internally kind of rooted for him a little bit. And now it's time, you guys, to give you my ranking of the 10 Saw movies. The Spiral. When a policeman is murdered by a Jigsaw copycat killer, Sick Banks is assigned to investigate the case. In the process of punishing the perpetrator, he ends up facing the demons of his past. The issue with Spiral for me was that it did not feel like a Saw movie. It felt like it was taking me back to those 1990s detective movies, and it had a very different tone, and it just did not feel like a Saw movie to me. And I also do believe that casting Chris Rock for that role was not the right choice, at least that is my feeling. The film exists outside of the storyline of the other movies from the franchise. It delves into issues like police corruption, but I also do not think that this was portrayed in a good way. The movie did not feel like a Saw movie at all, and even though I understand what they were trying to do, it was still predictable and boring. Jigsaw. The police are at a dead end when investigating numerous ghastly murders in the city that resemble the work of a serial killer who has been dead for 10 years. Introducing a new game and a new team of law enforcement agents and pathologists, Jigsaw follows the investigation into whether Jigsaw has somehow survived or a new killer has emerged. Even though they did try to resurrect with this one the franchise that was dormant for 7 years, I still feel like they did not quite achieve that Saw feeling. It felt somewhat disconnected to the previous installment, also when it comes to the visuals, and the grittiness that the Saw films had was also gone. And then there's the ending, which made the whole Saw timeline all the more confusing. Although the film features one of the most memorable deaths in the whole series, which was the laser collar, its addition to the series lore are less compelling than in previous film. Saw 3D. As a fierce battle rages over Jigsaw's terrible legacy, survivors seek support from a fellow survivor and self-help guru who has a few dark secrets of his own. Meanwhile, crooked cop Hoffman seeks revenge against Jigsaw's wife and an author who has his own story. This was supposed to be the last Saw movie, but as we all know, that didn't happen. And this movie follows a guy that is a survivor or claims to be a survivor from one of the Jigsaw's games, and he writes a book about it, and it's kind of trying to help other Jigsaw victims that survived the games. That storyline was just not truly interesting to me, and even though the traps were gory, I felt like they were lacking a little bit of imagination. They were a little bit boring to me. Undoubtedly one of the weakest films in the Saw franchise, but bringing back Lawrence Gordon was a great choice and certainly elevates the film's impact on the series. Saw 5. As the apparently last disciple and heir apparent of Jigsaw, Hoffman goes on the hunt to protect his secret. Using a series of increasingly bizarre and grisly traps, Hoffman eliminates his enemies one by one to protect the Jigsaw legacy. The film elaborates a little bit more on Hoffman and his relationship with Jigsaw and how he became the apprentice and all of that, and I did like to see that. And even though this movie is less memorable than other Saw movies, I have to say I was a really huge fan of the last test that the contestants have to go through, where they have to put, you know, their hands into this trap in order to give enough blood to move on and get out of this game. That was quite gruesome. It's probably one of the most disturbing ones to watch and one of the ones that was more nerve-wracking. But the story and the editing was a big setback after Saw 4, and we missed a good plot twist here, and the movie was just dull. Saw 4. During the autopsy of serial killer Jigsaw, a cassette tape is discovered in his stomach in which he warns us that his gory games will continue. Sure enough, Lieutenant Daniel Rigg is forced to follow a blood-drenched trail of torture, dismemberment, and death in order to find two missing colleagues. This movie is where the whole Saw narrative, the whole storyline started to fall apart. And even though we did get good traps, I felt like the whole story was really convoluted here, and the franchise started to show a little bit of franchise fatigue. And the movie, you know, when it comes to the traps and the gore, it was basically mutilate yourself or die. So it was not also one of the fairest ones when it comes to giving a choice to the victims. The amount of twists and timeline changes were just headache-inducing at some point. At least in previous entries, we could follow the conflict. Saw 3. Dr. Lynn Denland becomes a pawn in the Jigsaw killer's latest gory game. Kidnapped and taken to an abandoned warehouse, she finds Jigsaw bedridden and dying. Her task is to keep the maniac alive long enough for Jeff, a fellow victim, to complete his own task. Each is unaware that Jigsaw has much bigger and deadlier plans in store. The third installment focused a little bit more on the relationships between the main characters that were established early on in the franchise, and also gives us some quite interesting traps. This one was a more of an emotional entry in which we have almost kind of like a father-daughter relationship between Jigsaw and Amanda, who is his apprentice, and we see him as a mentor, and we see the more human side of him connecting with Amanda. However, when it comes to the traps here, it almost feels like Jigsaw has set them up. These kind of tests were set up for the subjects to fail, and that goes a little bit against what Jigsaw always has preached, that is, everybody deserves a second chance. Bonus points go here for Carrie's horrific angel trap, reminiscent of the Blood Eagle torture method, and the one that I will never forget for being so disgusting is the rotten pig being liquefied. Saw 6. With Jigsaw still directing events from beyond the grave, Hoffman emerges as their heir to the killer's twisted legacy. But as the FBI closes in, Hoffman sets in motion a game that is designed to reveal Jigsaw's grand scheme. The film heavily criticizes privatized healthcare, showcasing traps in which the victim must weigh the value of different people's lives the way that insurance companies do. This one was quite gory and thrilling, and it did something interesting, which is that not all the subjects, not all the victims that were in the traps were evil. They were not all bad people. They kind of were sometimes at the wrong place at the wrong time, or working at the wrong company in this case, and that was quite interesting to see. I really love to see that theme of, you know, these big corporations not caring about who lives or dies, it's all about the money, that kind of being translated into the traps. Also, this movie features one of my favorite traps, which is the shotgun carousel. I thought it was genius, I thought it was great, and it kind of also, again, brings back the theme of people are chosen at random to die when you have health insurance problems. And I love to see that. Probably the people that were sitting in that carousel did not feel that great about it, but I really enjoyed that trap. Though it's not as strong as the earlier movies, it definitely improved on the more recent predecessors, bringing a better pacing and creative traps. Saw 2. On the hunt for the twisted vigilante and serial killer Jigsaw, Detective Eric Matthews and his team must apprehend the elusive murderer to rescue 8 people trapped in an abandoned house before they succumb to his torturous and murderous games. One twist to this task is that Matthews' own son, Daniel, is among the 8 people Jigsaw has chosen to test for their lack of morality. I feel like Saw 2 really was the one that started to establish all the lore when it comes to the Saw franchise, and I think it's also one of the strongest sequels because of that. It was a good sequel to the first one. What this movie did was build up from the first movie and gave us traps that were a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more thought through, and it was a lot of fun to watch. It managed to be a good sequel because it expanded the universe, we got to understand a little bit better Jigsaw, and it was a great kind of like step ahead on the franchise after the original, which was really hard to beat. We all know now that Jigsaw is John Kramer, we know his identity, and in this one he's gonna have a more in-depth conversation with one of the detectives. Basically, for the majority of the movie, he's just sitting there talking to a detective, and it gives us a little bit more kind of like a peek into his mind. While Saw 2 isn't as good technically as the original, its many clever twists and exploration of Jigsaw's mind make the second entry a fun, guilty pleasure to watch. Saw 10. Hoping for a miraculous cure, John Kramer travels to Mexico for a risky and experimental medical procedure, but things do not go quite as he expected. Jigsaw decides to use this as an opportunity, and with a newfound purpose, he goes back to design and create ingenious traps to give the people that have wronged him a choice: live or die. Make your choice. The 10th movie on the franchise has a wonderful script, and it focuses on Jigsaw. We really get to know John Kramer. He is the main character in the movie. We see him really involved throughout the whole process, and we also really get to know him as an individual. We get to understand him better, and we're gonna find ourselves rooting for him. The relationship he has here with Amanda, their connection, is unmatchable. The movie managed to go back to the original and get all the elements that make a Saw movie, but also gave us something different, and this mix is really hard to achieve, and they did it. It had also great traps with great gore, and it was one of the best, and that is why it's on my top 2. So, photographer Adam Stanheit and oncologist Lawrence Gordon regain consciousness while chained to pipes at either end of a filthy bathroom, as the two men realize they've been trapped by a sadistic serial killer nicknamed Jigsaw and must complete his perverse puzzle to live. Original movies are often considered the best in a franchise, trilogy, series, and I feel like here is also the case. I know some people would say now Saw 10 is the best Saw movie, and I can see why you would say that because the script is really fantastic, but there is something about the first Saw movie and the unexpected of the first time that you watch that movie. I have never forgotten that experience, and the twist of this movie, that ending, has been one of the most shocking, unexpected endings of horror that I have ever seen. And simply for that, it is so hard to surprise someone with a twist that you are literally like your jaw drops. And that was me when I saw the first Saw movie. And for that, it deserves the first place. It was fresh, it was innovative, and it was like a mind game. It was psychological horror, but also with gore. And I just loved that first movie. The low budget added grittiness to the movie. We were introduced to Jigsaw as this new killer that was playing these games that were, you know, morally questionable, and put the audience in a position where they didn't really know who to root for. I mean, in the first one, I guess you were more for the victims, and as the franchise goes on and you get to understand John Kramer more and more, by the time you get to Saw 10, you're gonna be absolutely rooting for him. The elaborate devices constructed to inflict pain were innovative at the time. The scenes in the parking garage and the dark apartment, lit only by camera flashes, remain chilling. The sound of Jigsaw's gravelly voice pouring out of the tape recorder is still as ominous as sound as one could imagine. And as I said before, when you get to the ending, you're going to be absolutely shocked if you've never seen this movie before. Like, I know that many people are saying, oh, Saw 10 is now better than the original one, but I think we forget what we felt when we watched that movie for the very first time. And for me, it's always going to be number one. And this, you guys, was my ranking of the Saw movies. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know down below which ones are your favorites from the franchise. Let's talk about it in the comments down below. Thank you guys as always so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next coffee time. Bye!